Yeah, I want to take off the Tufts University hoodie. I didn't go to Tufts.
Oh, you can pretend you did.
I went to UMass. I'm cool with that. Where'd you go to school? You
That
went to what?
works. I went to Endicott.
I knew it was one of those
Yeah.
preppy schools.
I regret it, but I went there.
Oh.
It's too expensive. I'm still paying it off.
Yeah, I actually I hear a lot of that people in your age group, that the staggering college loan debt.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's not great.
No, I talk about that a lot because I've got nephews and nieces and so forth.
So I think I started out with, it had to have been $120,000 of student debt. Like that's how ridiculous it is for a communications degree. That's absurd. But you don't get told that when you're 18 years old.
Exactly.
Like you don't get told just with the situation. My parents didn't know. They didn't go to college. So they're just like, go to college. You're going to get a great education. You're going to make the money back. Like it's all going to be fine. And the next thing you know.
How old were you when you got your first credit card?
My first credit card? I don't think I got my first credit card until I was like 20, 21. Okay. Maybe even after that.
I didn't get my first credit card until I was 25.
Right.
And one of the things I noticed over the years, I would go to college campuses a lot, either to speak or to cover an event. And UMass, I'd walk through the campus center at UMass, and I went to UMass, and they have all these tables all set up in the campus center. And when I was there, it was like, like demonstrations, stop the war, or donate to this cause, or some frat is selling T-shirts to raise money for, whatever. But I'd start to go there years, like 20 years after I graduated, and there were these tables everywhere. They're basically giving out credit cards. And
it's all, the whole system is kind of a scam, to be honest with you. Like
you sign up for a credit card. Oh, like no, blah, 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 free credit card, $500 limit. Okay, what's so $500 limit? But you get these kids that would get 7, 8, 9, 10 credit cards. And as soon as you make your first payment, they increase your limit.
Yep.
You make another payment and they increase it more. Now all of a sudden you get a $10,000 limit. I was talking to one kid that he had like $25,000 in credit card debt.
Yeah.
When he graduated from college. I had none of that because I had no credit card. Therefore, I couldn't run debt.
Oh, they're handing them out like hotcakes now. Like I get them in the mail, like the pre-approved and all that stuff. And then I think I was like 2021. You have people telling you got to build your credit, so you're panicking. Then you got the student loan debt on top of it. I've never had credit card debt. I've only had student loan debt, but that's enough to hold me back in general. Luckily, I did get myself a place, but it's not like a $450,000 place. You know what I mean? Like it's a starter home, but I don't know how people do it these days. I really don't, unless they got like big time scholarships right out of school. This is all going in the show, by the way, because it's a good conversation to have for people who are getting into, they got to know what they're getting themselves into. So, so we could actually go off of that topic. First off, I want to know how you've been since this whole pandemic started. I know we had a couple of conversations since then, but I mean, what have you been up to? What's been going on in the world of Steve Buckley?
Well, I mean, I've been working out of my house like a lot of people do. And I haven't been traveling. I haven't been going to restaurants. I'm in that age group where you got to be a little careful about this. So I've been guarding myself. So I've got two major things going for me that make it impossible for me to complain. One is I haven't lost my job.
Yeah, that's a huge thing.
And it puts me, ahead of a lot of people. And two, I haven't gotten sick. So the way I look at it is, if you still have your job and you have your health, then you have zero to complain about. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, boo-hoo, I can't go bowling, or I can't go to a restaurant, or I can't hop on a plane and go to South Beach or something. So I'll get past this just fine.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm in the same boat where it's, we've seen layoffs at the company I'm at right now. I'm sure there's been layoffs where you are, maybe not, I don't know, but there's been layoffs all over this sports media industry. I'm happy that I'm not one of them, but who knows what could happen if this thing drags on. I'm happy to still have my job as well. And I think the way you're approaching it is the right way to approach it. If you still have a job, you're already ahead of so many people through this. If you have your health, you're already ahead of so many people through this. It's tough right now, and it's tough to complain too, because I find, like, for example, my girlfriend, she works in a salon, right? And so she'll come back from work and she'll see me on my laptop kicking back, watching the Pats, and I'm working. But she's like, "Really? This is what you do? You don't know how good you have it." So I think we do in this industry, as long as we still have our jobs, gotta kind of remember that.
No, I agree. And so I'm just going to ride it out, man.
Yeah, that's what you got to do. Last time we actually did an interview. I don't know if I told you this the last time we talked on the phone, but when we did that interview, it got deleted. I don't know what happened. I think we did it over the phone, and I used some third-party app to record it. I should have known probably that was not going to work. So I'm happy to have you on now. I think when we talked then, we talked about kind of just a broad.
Is this part of the podcast, by the way?
This is the podcast.
This is it.
This is the show. We're just
Okay.
talking. Yeah. We talked about the sports media field and how it's kind of just how much it's changed over time since you started. I'm not calling you old. I'm not saying that, but it's changed so much since you started in this field. What kinds of things do you see? Like, if you're starting in this field now, what do you need to be doing? What is the key?
I would say to diversify.
That's what I always hear.
To be willing to do lots of different things. And the first thing I tell people is, what do you want to be? Do you want to be a journalist or do you want to work in sports? I meet a lot of people who say, oh, I want to work in sports. And I say, okay, well, go work in sports. Go work for the Bruins, the Red Sox, or go work for a minor league baseball team. If you want to work in journalism, if you want to work in media,
right, go
work in media. Now, I didn't get into the business. I took kind of a weird route. I didn't get into the business to be in sports. My first job was as a sports writer with the Westfield Evening News in 1978. I was 22 and fresh out of UMass. And I did that for a year, and I decided I didn't want to do sports. So I took a job as a news reporter at another small paper, the Journal Tribune, up in Biddeford, Maine. And I was going to be in news. That was where I was headed. And I did it for 6 months. Well, then the sports editor quits. And since I had been working in sports in Westfield, Mass, the managing editor says, well, do you want to be sports editor? I said, no, I want to work in news. And he says, oh, too bad, the job pays like $230 a week. And I was making like $170 a week. And, it's a long time ago. And that represented a huge raise. So I became sports editor of the Journal Tribune, which led me to going to Portland, the Portland Press Herald, which is the biggest paper in the state. And I covered minor league baseball. And then it was off to Seattle, New York. And, here we are. And I don't regret it. I mean, I love what I've done. And it's allowed me to branch out into, TV and radio and some books and some other things. But if all you have is sports knowledge, that isn't going to cut it, especially in today's age. You need to be able to do different things. I always tell younger people, send out a movie review, send out a story on some political event, show prospective editors that you're versatile and you can do different things.
Yeah, that's key. And the other thing I've heard a lot is get involved. Like, for example, what I'm doing now with a podcast. Like, if you're just getting into the field now with writing and that's it, I don't think that's going to work in this landscape of media. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, there's some really, really good writers out there. You are one of them. You've proved that that's kind of wrong. The Athletic's doing great things for journalism. But I feel like when you're just breaking in, like right this second, you're coming out of school and if all you have is writing and you can't show anything else, I don't know if that cuts it. Do you agree with that? Or do you think, do you think video is important? Like, you need video, you need podcasting, or is that just totally like icing on the cake?
There's like Megan Ottolini at the Herald.
Yep.
She's got like a whole TV station in her backpack, and she can go set up somewhere on her own and set up her camera. And she was right there in the middle of the presidential race. She was at this big Trump thing somewhere in Boston, and people are jabbing at her and stuff. Oh, fake news, and she's in her early 20s. She's very talented, very versatile, and she's setting up cameras and she's doing all this stuff. And like, I got the little phone here and I could take pictures and stuff, but my technical skills, I'm sure I could acquire them if need be, but my technical skills are sort of at a low point at minimum compared to what people in your age group are doing. And thank God that you were able to do that, because like I said, they will say, "Oh, can you shoot?" Like when I was at the Westfield Evening News, I had to take my own pictures because we only had one full-time photographer, and I'd cover like the Westfield High, West Springfield game in soccer, and I was supposed to take some pictures they can run in the paper. I had terrible photo taking skills. I can do it now with a cell phone because it's just the technology is there. But I had this like old phone, this old camera rather, and I'd take like 50 pictures and I'd take them back to the guy in the little photo room in the back. And it was a quest to find one usable photo because everything I had was blurry and washed out, and so forth. And so I finally developed this trick where I would like wait until there's like a timeout. And then like Dave Engelbrecht, the big football star at Westfield High, would go over to the bench and get a drink of water. Yeah. And like he's just standing there with the water, and I take a picture and we run it in the paper on Monday. Running back Dave Engelbrecht takes a breather during Westfield's 28-6 victory over Westside on Saturday because it was the one usable photo. And it's like you need to have a lot of versatility, which clearly I didn't have back then. Fortunately, the next paper I went to, and then from there on, my photography skills weren't needed. I can take pictures now for the website because the photos you take on a cell phone will come out great as long as it's a decent photo at our website. So I'll snap a picture of some guy I'm interviewing and so forth, but I couldn't have done that back then.
Going back to what you said about choosing between being a journalist or if you just want to work in sports, I think that was a very important point because I think a lot of college students are a little confused about that. So my example would be when I broke into college, I obviously you take intro to journalism and you take those types of classes. And I was like, I thought I'm working in sports media now, but I don't think I had the same thing in my head going into school of what sports media was. It's not just knowing about sports. I've always been knowledgeable about sports, but going out to talk to people, putting yourself out there, having the mic and being able to ask questions, follow-up questions, go to an event, cover the event, do all that stuff. I don't think a lot of students, I'm not saying all, but a lot of students don't understand just how much work goes into it. So what do you think, what would your advice be to those students who are kind of, I guess, stuck in that place of trying to choose, do I want to be a journalist or do I want to go into something like what should stand out to them as a warning sign? Like this might not be for you.
Yeah, that's a great question. So by way of example, when I was working in Portland, Maine, I was covering the AAA baseball team, the Maine Guides, and I was traveling with them. And we were in Toledo one day, and we had an off day. And Toledo is only about 50 miles. It's in Northwest Ohio. It's only about 50 miles from Detroit. So me and Gary Thorne, who later became a very famous announcer with the Mets and the White Sox and Orioles and hockey, but he was the play-by-play of the Maine Guides. This was 1984. We rented a car and drove to Tiger Stadium because the Indians, who were the major league affiliate of our Maine Guides, were in Detroit playing the Tigers. So we're at Tiger Stadium, and I got talking with Terry Pluto, who longtime sports writer with the Cleveland Plain Dealer, and he's asked me, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? And I said, well, I want to cover big league baseball. I want to be a traveling beat writer, which I ended up being. But he was rolling his eyes, and it's lots of travel, it's lots of do it. And then I'll never forget this. He puts his hands up. He says, you know what? You want to do it, do it. Because if you don't do it, you're always going to wonder what it's like. But if you really want to do it, you go do it, and there'll be a job for you. And that was Terry Pluto. It was 1984. And, I kept plugging away, and I ended up out in Seattle, New York, and then Boston as a big league traveling baseball writer. And everything all the pitfalls he told me about it came to pass. The travel can really wear you down. the late nights, the hotel food, the press box food, the stress of writing a deadline. Now, I wouldn't have changed it for anything. I mean, it's a wonderful memory to have had and to have done that for those years. But it is physically exhausting sometimes, more so probably now. I don't do that thing now, but these poor people now have to tweet, and there's everything's
There's so much,
instantaneous.
yeah.
It's a 24/7 industry, which is why beat writers generally, I mean, when I was in the business, when I was just starting out, the beat writers at most papers, they'd been there 20, 25 years. It was just what you did.
Right.
And you look at today's industry, it's a lot more women, a lot more young people, and they transition, they move in and out of different beats and different jobs because it is exhausting. So with that long-winded preamble out of the way, I would tell younger people what Terry Pluto told me in 1984. If you really, really, really want to do it, then you really, really should. And I think what's going to happen is people say, oh, there aren't going to be any jobs. There are so few newspapers. Well, to a degree, that's true. But what will happen is I think a lot of people back in my day just did it because, okay, I'll just do this. And then eventually trickle down, people retire and leave and so forth, and you end up with a job. I think what will happen now moving forward is that the younger people who, again, Terry Pluto, really, really want to do it, will be generally the people with the most zeal and interest in doing it, and there will be jobs for them. Maybe not as many, but it will be sort of a leveling off thing where the people who don't want to spend the time required to get to a certain level may migrate to other pursuits and other industries and other jobs, whereas those who really want to do it will kind of stay with it, and the jobs will be, particularly where there's so much turnover now for the younger people.
I've definitely got the feeling talking to people. I've had people reach out to me about, hey, what does it take to get into this field? I see you work in NBC Sports Boston. How do you get that job? How do you do this? How do you do that? And what I always say is, like, don't expect to get full-time gig right out of college, because it's probably not going to happen. There's not enough jobs out there to begin with, A, and B, you have to be good. I mean, no one's just going to hire you because you have the degree. You have to have writing samples. Even for my site that I do on the side, I require writing samples. I require some sort of work that shows you can do it.
Right.
So that's what I always say to people. Now, do you think for those people who are journalism students who have decided, hey, this is my path, I want to be in sports journalism, do you think beat writing is a necessity, or do you think there's other ways they can do it that can kind of help them evolve in this field? Or would you say you got to get on a beat in some form or fashion, whether it's part-time or full-time?
Yeah, depends on what your end game is. Like if you want to be a columnist, which I did for quite a few years and still do, if you want to be a feature writer, which is a lot of what I do now at The Athletic, I write longer pieces. I don't think there are a lot of entry-level jobs for younger people to get those jobs unless they have some hardcore news and beat writing skills. And right. I think that's still a good, like the Boston Globe, the Boston Herald, the Hartford Providence Journal, all the big papers and websites are not going to hire, unless you're just this like lottery pick. I mean, who knows? I remember back in the early 80s, the Boston Globe hired Jackie McMullen. I think I forget what paper she worked at, but she was at the Globe at a very young age, and at a very young age was writing features because she had a singular talent. Ian Thompson was another one at the Boston Globe back then that was writing some pretty in-depth features at a young age. But by and large, I think many people who come into the industry, you basically take what you can get. I mean, Steve Hewitt at the Boston Herald was hired by the Herald out of UMass to basically answer phones. He was what they call an EA, editorial assistant. And he's answering phones, he's typing in agate, he's doing whatever grunt work is available, working those odd part-time shifts at the Herald. And then all of a sudden, oh, you want to go cover a high school game, and we're a little short the Patriots today. You want to go do a Patriots sidebar on Wednesday, media day, interview day. And all of a sudden, he's assembling a small group of clips. And, oh, do you want to do a Red Sox sidebar? And, well, now he's the Red Sox beat writer.
Right.
And just because he kept his head down and kept plowing away. and you never, ever, ever say no. If they say, do you want to go do this convention on Chinese pottery at the convention? Sure, I'll go do it. And
Right.
do it. And you don't want them to get it in their heads, well, we're not going to ask him because he always said, never say no. Going way, way back, there's a really great autobiography, Nice Guys Finish Last, written, it's Leo DeRocha, the Hall of Fame manager. It's his autobiography, which was ghostwritten by Ed Lynn, who was from Boston, who's passed away. I got to know him over the years. But I read that book in high school, and I remember something Leo DeRocha said in the book. He said that when he was a minor league baseball player, he was a shortstop. He was a shortstop second baseman. And his manager says, hey, can you play center field? He said, oh, yeah, I played 50 games in center field 3 years ago in high school. Oh, great. Never say no.
Yeah.
Because if you're on the bench and this minor league manager says, can you play center field? Leo DeRocha said, you're damn right I can play center field. If you say no, manager's going to turn around and put someone else out there. So if they need you to do something, do it.
Absolutely. That's so important because 2 years ago when I was in Fort Myers, that was my first time going to Fort Myers. In fact, that was my first time traveling for anything in this field. That was my first time. Fort Myers, go down to Florida, cover the team. You're on your own. I didn't have much help there. But you know what? I wouldn't trade it for anything because I was scared shitless. Yeah, you can swear on this podcast, by the way. I was scared shitless going down to Fort Myers. So I was asked to go on kind of an emergency basis. I didn't expect that. It was like, can you go in a week? And I panicked a little bit. I was like, I got to check my schedule. I got to make sure I can do this, that. And kind of, it was my way of being like, oh shit, this is happening. Do I want to do this? Or am I going to be the guy who says no? And who knows if I ever get that opportunity again? So sure enough, I went down there and it was probably the most rewarding experience that I've had in this field to this point. I'm only 27, so I'm hoping to have more of those rewarding experiences once this COVID crap's gone. But that was far and away the best thing that's happened to me so far. So that advice is perfect. Never say no. We can talk about you now because we talked a lot about the young people trying to get into college. I want to talk more about you and your kind of experience. Take me through your writing process. Like if you sit down to write an article or a column, whatever, and you're getting in the zone, what is your kind of routine for writing and getting into that position where you're ready to write a long column or whatever it is that you're doing that day?
Well, it depends on what I'm writing. If I'm covering a live event, God knows I haven't done one of those in a while, to say it's a Patriots game that begins at 1:00 and the game ends at 4:15, you go downstairs, you interview the number of people you need to interview, the quarterback, the coach, Belichick, and so forth. And then you come upstairs, you're only going to write about 1,000 words. You bang it out. You're not going to do long, ponderous walks along the beach, running your fingers through your hair, looking for inspiration. Right. You got to get it done, particularly when I was in newspapers, because you had press runs in newspaper and deadlines. And I mean, God, there's a term I like to use. It's called writing with your fists, where you run downstairs and you got to get it done in 40 minutes. And you're just like pounding away at the keyboard because you got to get it done. Yeah. So there's that. And now with The Athletic, I have kind of a hybrid job. I do write columns, but I write longer pieces too. I mean, I wrote 11,000 words on the 5th anniversary of the Ice Bucket Challenge a couple of years ago, and I interviewed like 40 people. So that's not the norm, but I do quite a few pieces that are 4,000, 5,000, and 6,000 words. And you interview a lot of people, you look up a lot of stuff, you transcribe a lot of your interviews. That's
easy. Always fun.
It's the worst part of the job. I'm actually working on a long piece now, and my desk is just piled high with stuff. And for a piece like that I really want to put the time in to really make it work, and this one's going to be between 4,500, 5,000 words. I can't, again, I don't have deadlines. I have to get it in a couple of days, but it's not like I'm writing furiously to get it in by 11 o'clock.
Right.
So in a case like that, I have this is my office in my house, so it's big. and I have room, I have file cabinets, and it's a good writing area. And but I can't write for more than an hour and a half on something like this because I get a little punchy. So I may stop. I may go downstairs and make a sandwich or a cup of coffee. I have 3 chocolate labs. I might take them for a walk, and I'll also do housework. I'll just stop and run the dishwasher. I'll vacuum, and I'll do something just to. And then while I'm doing it, I'm thinking about the way I need this transition to work and stuff like that. I'm probably attaching a lot more loftiness to it than it requires, but
No, I agree. Even for my thing, my job where I'm more so writing quick articles and everything, that can get tiring because you got to sort of take a deep breath and be like, all right, on to the next one, like reset sort of before you get into it. And so when you go take that walk or you go to do the whatever you're doing, something might pop in your head. It's like anytime you go in the shower, you start thinking of things, all the things you should have said that you didn't think of at the time. You know what I mean? Like that type of situation. So,
well, now when it comes to writing a deadline, and I've been in crowded press boxes, so the World Series, and and all that, and there are some writers. I'll look around, I'll see this man or woman over there, and they're just like, like they're holding socks, and like boom, they press send. Like I'm like a third of the way through, and they're packing up and they're out the door. Right. And then you've got what we call bleeders, people that really just, and Jerry Callahan, who was a terrific columnist with the Herald and later on a feature writer at Sports Illustrated. I mean, he would just, like, it was just torture. Because I remember, I actually met him during the '86 World Series. I was working in Portland, Maine. He was with the Lowell Sun. But I remember just, he would write, he was just like, oh, just like, and you'd look over and says, oh my God, this poor guy. And then you'd pick up Sports Illustrated or the Herald, whatever, and it's just like terrific piece that just, really great writing. And he put a lot of work into it. And then as for the people who just bang it out and walk out the door, some of them, their stuff sucks. And then some of them, like, oh my God, this is so good.
I'd love to be one of those people. That'd be great.
I'm not.
Don't we all?
I'm not. And but it is. It all depends on how people's brains work. It's just different strokes for different folks.
So, what columns over the years that you've written are you the most proud of? If you had to pick a few.
Ooh. Oh God.
I don't want to put you on the spot or anything,
no,
but
I mean, there's some. I like the weird ones better. I mean, oh, this was a hard-hitting column, and then I don't count, like, so Boston teams have won 12 championships total this century.
Yep.
6 by the Patriots, 4 by the Red Sox,
yep.
1 by the Celtics, 1 by the Bruins. And I could say, oh, I covered, Vinatieri's field goal in New Orleans. I covered the 2018 World Series when Chris Sale strikes out Manny Machado. The Malcolm Butler interception, I was there for that. The 28-3, I was there for that. But those are not the ones I'm most proud of because anybody could have done that. I just happened to have a seat.
Right.
And to be frank, I don't know if the stuff I wrote was like epic compared to what the games were. I mean, some of them were good, some of them not so good, but others wrote better stuff.
And you're also getting that content everywhere.
Yeah.
People are just choosing where to read it. They're not really, maybe they are looking at your byline because you're a popular figure in this industry, but for the most part, they're just looking for a place to read it.
Yeah. So I'm not proud. I'm happy that I was at all those events. Not many of us could say we were at all 12. It's like 6 of us, I think, or 7 in the Boston media because we keep count of that. It just happened by accident. There's me, there's Dan Shaughnessy, and a few others. Joey Messina from Channel 7 was at all 12 championship. Mike Lynch at Channel 5. And but I'm not proud of those. I'm happy I was at them. But there have been other. I mean, just like a month or two ago, I'll give you just kind of a fun one. You may have seen the little viral video that was making the rounds of the Celtics are the balls guy.
Oh yeah, love that guy.
Yeah, and it was everywhere. My editor, Sean Lee, calls me up. It was his idea. And he says, is there any chance we can find this guy? well, we worked together. We were going through different, well, it was also in Barstool had really sent it to the moon and back.
Oh yeah.
But people had also put it on YouTube when there were comments there. And one person, oh, that was Donnie Beardsley. And we were able to, Donnie died 4 or 5 years ago, quite suddenly of a heart attack. He was married, he had 3 or 4 kids. And I was able to track down his brother and his wife. And they told me like wonderful anecdotes about what a sweet, affable, fun-loving guy he was. And all people had seen was a 7-second video. And I was able to determine through Donnie's brother that the video that Barstool got was from a 30 for 30 documentary on the Celtics Lakers series. And that was just, and I got the director of it on the phone who told me, yes, they used that. They got that from NBA Entertainment, and they had a crew filming different, and they talked to Donnie at a bar, maybe the Fours, they weren't really sure. And he just, who's gonna win it? There's no other reason, the Celtics are the balls.
So awesome.
And it caught fire. But I was able to tell who he was, what he represented, what he was all about, what his family life was. And his wife met him at a party in Medford, Mass, in the 80s. And she was being set up to meet this other guy, but she met Donnie. And I love this story that Donnie took a pizza box, an empty pizza box, and he wrote his name and number. And he says, call me sometime. And she liked him. She called him, and they ended up having this one, get married and had a bunch of kids.
That's amazing.
And there's this it really puts some emphasis on, and it fleshes out who he was. That game where they filmed that little video was before Game 5 of the '84, one of the NBA Finals years against the Lakers. Well, Donnie's brother told me Donnie was at that game. He attended the game. Donnie didn't have a ticket. Donnie was with a buddy, and he knew somebody who knew somebody, and he walked in with a bunch of concessions workers at like an hour and a half, 2 hours before the game, got inside. They went into a men's room and stood on the stall, the toilet with the door closed. So if anybody came in, and they just sat there or stood there until the gates opened and all the fans started coming in. And then they just opened the door, washed their hands like they were in there, and then walked out and watched the game. And so I'm proud of that piece because it was very well read. It was fun.
It's unique.
It was unique. It was different.
Right.
And, I credit my editor with the idea, but somebody had to write it. Unfortunately, it was me. And I love that piece. And it didn't take me a year to write. I wrote it in a couple of hours after I got in touch with his brother and Donnie's widow, his wife. And those are the pieces that I like because they're just unique, they're different, they're fun, and people react to them.
When you reach out like that, because I think a lot of people get nervous about making that first step, reaching out, following up, which is all journalism 101. But I think that's a step a lot of people are afraid of making especially when you're first breaking in. Do you ever is that ever a challenge, or is that easier than a lot of people believe it to be? Like if you're reaching out, can it be sort of a pain, and then you got to figure out a new story, and then you're panicking about that? And like, are the people you reach out to maybe giving you a little bit of pushback? Like, is that as scary as many people make it out to be?
I wouldn't call it scary. I think that comes with experience.
Right.
If you've done it enough times, it's like when you're playing pickup baseball when you're a kid, and or your dad throws a baseball at you and it seems like it's coming at you 100 miles an hour, and you're like, which was always the case with me. I was never much but after you've done it enough times, there's a reason why Wade Boggs would take like 200 ground balls every day at 4 o'clock before a game, because it was just a matter of rhythm and keeping that going. And I think to apply that to what we do, I think if you've done it enough times, there's a comfort level that comes with it. And I think it helps that if you've been around long enough, generally people kind of know who you are and where you're from. And they say, oh, okay, he's been around a while. And that can help. But just to go back to one of my first, and this will really answer your question for it, one of my first assignments at the Westfield Evening News. Westfield is right near Holyoke. And back in those days, Holyoke Millers were a double-A team. They played at Mackenzie Field. They were the double-A farm club of the Milwaukee Brewers. The general manager of the Brewers was Harry Dalton. Harry Dalton was from West Springfield, Mass., which is right next to Westfield and Holyoke. And he'd gone to Amherst College. Well, Harry Dalton is coming back to Holyoke for Harry Dalton night. I had just been hired at the Westfield Evening News. I'm 22 years old. I'm a month and a half, 2 months out of UMass. I have to go to Mackenzie Field and interview Harry Dalton, who was a very well, he's passed away, but at the time, very well-known baseball executive. He was the Theo Epstein of his time. He had been with the Orioles. He'd been with the Mets. He was a very well-known guy. And I had to interview him. And I was wetting my pants. He was like 45, 50 years old, and I'm shaking, and I'm asking him, what's it like to be back in, like, and Harry Dalton actually said to me, he said, hey, just calm down. We're just two guys talking. And I'm like, okay. Because I was 22 years old. And I'll never forget that night on many levels. Number one, Max Patkin was there, the clown prince of baseball. If you've ever seen Bull Durham, Max Patkin, he's the guy that's running around the field. He's a professional clown. Max Patkin was making an appearance that night. The manager of the West Haven Yankees, Holyoke was playing the West Haven Yankees. The manager was Stump Merrill, who I would later cover when he managed the Yankees 16 years, 17, whatever it was, years later, when I was covering the Yankees and he was the manager. And in the third or fourth inning of that game, the West Haven pitcher was a guy named Gil Rondon, Rondon, and he got lit up a little bit. Stump came out to take him out, and as Gil Rondon's walking off the mound, this is at Mackenzie Field in 1978, he stopped, he threw his glove up in the air, and he started screaming, why can't I get anybody out? And he ran down the left field line, hopped over the fence, exited the ballpark and crossed the street, and there's a softball field across the street. And he sat out in the center field in full uniform like this, with his hands behind his neck.
Oh my God.
Watching the softball game for the next hour. So we're like, here's the game going on in front of us. And you look across the street, the pitcher would just get out of the game. It's across the street like the softball game. And I'm like, this is the business I want to be in.
Yeah, that's awesome.
This is all in one night. I interviewed Harry Dalton. I saw Max Patkin do his thing, squirting water out of his face. I saw Gil Rondon scream. And Gil Rondon made it to the big leagues. I think with the Houston Astros.
Good for him.
Gil Rondon made it to the big leagues, so good for him. But I mean, that was like the first thing I ever covered.
Yeah, that's great.
I want to be in this business. So.
Yep. Yeah, we've had those moments. I think if you work in sports and you're trying to figure yourself out, you have those moments of, okay, now I know I want to be in here. Going back to Fort Myers.
Like, what am I most proud of? Malcolm Buckley, yes, I was there. 23, yes, I was there. Bill Buckner, Game 6, I was there. The Celtics beating the Lakers, I was there. But
basically every single important Boston moment.
But the pieces, the stories I love to tell, but Gil Rondon and Harry Dalton and Donnie Beardsley, those are the pieces, those are the stories that I like to tell that are important to me.
Yeah. Going back to when I was talking about Fort Myers earlier, what you just said when you told that story, when you were kind of, I guess, starstruck in a way, like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm in this situation.
Yeah.
I always was like people are asking me, oh, well, you're going to see so-and-so there. Like, you're going to see Mookie Betts. You're going to see all of these guys who you've been watching on TV. Maybe you'll see Pedro, David Ortiz. Maybe they'll stop by. I'm like, I'm not going to be starstruck. I did some internships. I've seen some guys like Yarmer Yager looked me in the face one time. I'll be fine. So I get in the locker room for Fort Myers first time. I'm looking around like, that's fucking Mookie Betts. Like, holy shit. I was like, I didn't think it would hit me. So that's another thing you got to brace yourself for. One more thing on that, and then we can get into some baseball talk before we wrap things up. When you first talk to a player, like, for example, one of my regrets from Fort Myers is I didn't kind of put myself out there and do any like one-on-ones. I was kind of more covering the day-to-day. And next time if I go, that's a goal of mine, is to get some one-on-ones done. But how do you establish that relationship with the player or coach if you're just getting in? How do you kind of get over that awkwardness of, hey, hi, this is who I am, this is who I work for? Are they, for the most part, like, okay, what's up, let's talk? Or is it kind of like, get out of here, I don't have time for this? Or both?
Well, I'm not a beat writer anymore, so I don't do as
Right.
much of that. What I can tell you is that 1987 was like the first year I really covered a big league team on a daily basis. I had gone down to Fenway when I was up in Maine and out in Westfield. I'd get a day pass once in a while, but I'd be one of those people standing like 5 deep. Everyone's interviewing Yastrzemski and the veteran Boston baseball writers, Joe Gigliotti and Peter Gammons and Larry Whiteside and Chaz Scoggins and those guys, Bob Finnegan. They're interviewing Yaz. And I didn't even ask a question. I was just standing back. And I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel it was my place. I was just sort of a tourist. And at that point, then I covered the minor league team in Maine. But really, when I got out to Seattle, one of the things I did was I made it a point in spring training. I was there for 2 months, whatever. Dick Williams was the manager. And I said, every single day, one a day, I'm going to have a private interaction with every player in camp, just so they know who I am, what my name is. And it won't necessarily be an interview, just like some, and I'm not going to go one to or alphabetical order. It just depends on who's standing alone doing nothing or who I walk past. And I would try to find some little piece of commonality. And, I'm walking by and Jim Presley, who's the third baseman, walks by. And actually, I'll leave Jim Presley out of this, but like Mark Langston, who was the big lefty pitcher. And I went up to him and I said, hey, I just noticed in the bio that you played in, Modesto in the minor leagues. And I know a guy. And you just shoot the shit for like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 minutes, 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes.
Right.
And then, okay, thanks. And the reason I held up on Jim Presley, because they had a guy named Brick Smith who played briefly in the big leagues, but I spent like 5 minutes talking to him one day because he had played in Chattanooga the year before and hit like a bunch of home runs. Well, the old ballpark in Chattanooga was like 460 to center field. And I saw him one day and I said, hey, what's it like, hitting in Chattanooga and he's talking and stuff like that. Well, the very next day, now I have an interaction with Brick Smith. The next day I'm walking out to the field and Brick Smith comes walking by me and he says, hey, Buck. And I go, hey, Brick. And he just walks by me. The player directly behind him was Jim Presley, who was the third baseman. That's why I held off on this. Mm-hmm. And this stayed with me all these years. I had not really had an interaction with Jim Presley. I had talked to him in crowds of reporters, and he was a pretty good player at that point. Well, Brick Smith walks by me and says, hi, Buck. And I go, hey, Brick. Presley's right behind him, and he goes, hi, Buck. And I go, oh, hey, Jim. And he didn't really know me at that point, but he had picked it up through the guy in front of him.
Right.
And I said, oh, okay. So you develop relationships. And again, this is a lot more important for beat writers. And some put a lot more work into it or have a lot more natural affinity to it. I would say Rob Bradford at WEEI is uniquely talented with what we call working the clubhouse. He does it as well as anybody. When I was in New York, Michael Kay, who's now the play-by-play voice of the Yankees for the Yes Network, well, when I was covering the Yankees, he was with the New York Post and then the Daily News, and he worked the clubhouse better than anybody. Jeff Horrigan, who used to be at the Herald, was really good. I'm told Peter Gammons back in the day was uniquely talented. It's just it's something that some people want to do. They're good at it. I didn't put as much into that as other people. I was more into managers and coaches and general managers and scouts and stuff like that. And as a columnist now in feature, I don't. It's not really it's not really my purview to do that.
Right.
But I did enough of it, but some people are better at it than me.
Gotcha. So let's get into some baseball talk, because I know that's how we first kind of met in the newsroom, as we started randomly talking about. I'm actually going to press you on this one. I'm going to bust you a little bit.
I think the first time I ever talked to you.
What's that?
You got into my grill the first time I ever talked to you.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say. I think the first time I talked to you.
No, you're like,
No, so I think
Oh, is
our
this?
good friend Evan Drellick was in the newsroom at the time, and I remember this like it was yesterday. He was in the newsroom at the time. You guys were chatting. I'm kind of typing away on the computer, and I'm like eavesdropping a little bit. The topic at that time was a potential trade, Jackie Bradley Jr. for Jose Abreu. It was kind of a speculation thing at that point. And I'm sitting there, I'm listening to Evan Drellick talk about, oh, maybe it's not a good idea to trade JBJ for Jose Abreu. And I'm getting increasingly mad at the computer, just like, yes, it is. It's like, that's a no brainer. And I'm not 100% sure if you agreed with him or not, but that's where the conversation started, where I kind of piped in. I'm like, that's stupid. Like, they should pull that trade. They should have pulled that trade yesterday. And I remember that. That was like 3 years ago. Today, obviously that's a no-brainer because Jose Abreu just won the AL MVP. I'd like you to formally apologize on the show if you did say that that was a bad trade, JBJ for Jose Abreu.
I was a big JBJ guy, so I can.
I don't hate him, but Jose Abreu is like a 900 OPS guy, and JBJ he is what he is.
Hottest kid in the class. Congratulations. But I don't remember. I remember being a big JBJ guy because I often said every time I go to a game, he makes the greatest catch I've ever seen, and
which is very true.
He was worth the money, and I just love the way he played baseball. And I don't remember that specific thing. I do remember talking to Evan Drellick and just shooting the breeze. And all of a sudden, this like high school kid on the side of the desk starts piping.
Not high school.
I'm kidding. But, and I'm like, who the hell are you? And obviously it didn't offend me because we have a good relationship.
Oh yeah, no, it wasn't like a blow up. We got in a little bit of a debate there. Which if you're talking baseball, I'm going to
by the way, just to be clear, I admire that. The same situation, you would have been 23 back then or 24, whatever.
I think I was 23, 24 at the time. Yeah.
Okay. So if you go back to when I was 23, 24, if I was seated where you were seated,
right.
And on the other side, it was Joe Gigliotti from the Herald and Peter Gammons from the Globe, who've been covering the Red Sox for 100 years. If they were having that conversation, I would have been like, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So kudos to you for like, I don't care who you are. I'm going to throw in my 2 cents here.
Well, Evan Drellick was kind of my guy at the time. Like me and him got along great. So I was more so piping in to kind of be like, Evan, if you're going on TV with this take right now, like think about it a little bit because this is a little stupid. But you were also there, and I wasn't like afraid to talk to you either, and you shouldn't be afraid. That's another lesson to people listening. Like get involved, talk, like build relationships.
And Evan and I are just two schmucks. We just happen to have full-time baseball jobs, and we're making it smarter than you.
Hey, he's doing a great job, by the way, too. I just realized you guys work at the same company as well. So do you still talk with him or?
Oh yeah, not as much, but we worked together at the Herald for a short time. I actually first met him. He was at Mass Live. I think maybe even before that, he was like an intern at MLB or something.
Okay.
So I've known Evan as he's evolved, and then I got hired at the Athletic a little over 2 years ago, and then like a year later they hired him, and he's obviously he's more investigatory with the stuff he did in the cheating scandal with the Astros.
Yeah.
He's down in New York now. I'm more of a New England-based feature writer, so we don't have a lot to do with each other. There's an exchange of text once in a while and so forth.
Gotcha. One question I have for you, it's kind of a two-part question, is how did you first fall in love with the sport of baseball? And today, be honest, are you in love with what baseball is right now?
Okay, be honest, huh? It's tricky. Okay, so I fell in love with baseball because when I was a little kid, my older brothers and my older sister were huge Red Sox fans. So there was Red Sox talk going on in the house on a daily basis. And most importantly, my mother's brother, my uncle, Fitzy, Bill Fitzgerald, he worked at a place in Somerville by day, and at night he was an usher at Fenway Park. And so he was able to get us into the ballpark when we were kids. So the Red Sox would get like 6,000 to 7,000 people a game. So throughout my childhood, I knew his buddy at gate whatever, and he would let us in. And then he was the usher, my uncle, right behind the first base dugout. So those were all box seats, club season tickets. And we would wait until about the third inning. And by then, my uncle knew which of the people weren't in attendance, which seats were empty. And I'd go see my uncle in the third row, in the third inning rather, and he'd say, "Hey, go take those 2 seats down there." And I'm sitting like in the second row behind the dugout. That's how I grew up watching the Red Sox. And obviously 67 was huge. I was 11 years old when they won the pennant. But as early as I can remember, 69 was a big year too, because that was the first year, I was 13. That was the first year that me and my buddies could go to Fenway without adult supervision. And we must have gone to 40 games that year. No, I'm not exaggerating, because we just went all the time, because we could get in for free. We could sit where we wanted, because they didn't draw. They would draw much better by then, but there would still be empty seats. And then we'd see my uncle, and we'd get really good seats. And so baseball became a part of me and has been throughout my life. Do I love the game as much as? Yeah, I do.
Really? Okay.
I have the MLB package. I love watching the Mets. I fell in love with the Mets in '69 because the amazing Mets reminded me of the impossible dream Red Sox. So as much as I blather on about the '67 Red Sox, I can go on and on about the '69 Mets. Clan Jones at left, Tommy Agee in center, Buddy Harrelson at shortstop, Jerry Grody behind the plate, Seaver, Kuzman, Gary Gentry, Nolan Ryan, Ed Kranepool, I could just, Gil Hodges, the manager, I can go on and on. There's a lot of problems in baseball. They're really screwing it up. The hit a home run or strikeout thing, the changing pitches every 5 minutes, the rosters.
The extra innings rule.
It's.
Oh, you agree now?
What's that?
The extra innings rule, the man on second.
I wrote about. I had an epiphany on that.
Yeah, we talked about it, and I said I hate the rule, and you said you like it. Yeah, I just had to bring that up really quick.
Okay, I'm not sure about it moving forward when we get back to 162 game season. What I will tell you is that I was dead set against it. Apparently, we had this discussion. I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Fair enough.
But I wrote a column on it. You can look it up in The Athletic. I wrote a column on it during the season, and it was a Mets game. I was watching a Mets game. It was the first time that it looked like the game would go to the 10th inning. It was like the Mets had tied it in the 9th, or whoever they were playing tied it. And the announcers were Gary Cohen, Keith Hernandez, and Ron Darling. And they immediately started talking, well, if we go to the 10th inning, they put a runner on second. And I'm like, oh my God. And I'm immediately leaning forward. I'm watching the game on the MLB package on my iPad in the backyard. And I'm leaning forward and I'm thinking, do you bunt the guy over? And I'm really thinking strategy now. And I was pulled into it without even knowing I was. And I called my editor the next day. I said, you know what? I found myself organically being wrapped up in, do you bunt the runner over? And do you put a pinch runner out there? Do you, it's the guy who would have been, and all that. And do you have a pinch hitter up? Do you change pitchers? What do you do? Then when I didn't have any answers because it was all new and shiny to me. And I remember the Red Sox told me one of the things they talked about was that coming into the season, they reached out to Mike Gambino, the baseball coach at Boston College, because they had been using the rule in college baseball. And they just, hey, Mike, when you go to the 10th inning, do you do this? And what's your mindset? They just want to know what mindset was. And Mike was saying, I'll do this, I do that. So I found myself pulled into it, and I wrote a column saying, mea culpa, I'm all for this.
I actually, the way you put it there, it makes sense. But I still disagree. I don't like it. But I think the way you put it.
You did like it. I'm sorry.
No, definitely not. The way you put it does make sense, though, because it makes you think a little bit. But at the same time, wouldn't it be more like, for example, are you in favor of the universal DH?
I am now, because there's already enough.
But that goes against strategy in the National League.
Yeah, it does. And yeah, but you know what? For years and years, I would say, oh, the double switch. And, and I'll give you a historical example is that the final day of the 1967 season, it's the bottom of the sixth inning. Jim Lonborg is pitching his ass off for the Red Sox, but there were a couple of errors. They're down 2-0. If they have to win this game, if they have any chance of winning the pennant, they have to win this game. It's the last day of the season against the Minnesota Twins. It's the bottom of the sixth inning. Who's leading off for the Red Sox? Jim Lonborg, the pitcher. Do you send up a pinch hitter for him, down by 2 runs in the sixth inning, or do you let Lonborg bat?
Right, that's tough.
Jim Lonborg used to be a poor hitting pitcher. In spring training of that year, Bobby Doerr was the first base coach, Hall of Fame second baseman, or later he would be.
Yeah.
He got talking to Lonborg and he said, you need to improve on your bunting skills. If you can bunt, you can stay in the game longer and you can help affect the outcome of a game. He worked on his bunting skills. Dick Williams decides to let Jim Lonborg bat. And he drops his bunt down in front of the plate, takes a high hop. Cesar Tovar comes in, tries to, no play. The Red Sox scored 5 runs that inning and they won the American League pennant. I have often said, and I'll say again here in this forum, that is the most famous, most important bunt in Red Sox history and probably Major League Baseball because I can't think of another one. This one helped win an American League pennant. Now, so we're never going to have that again because that decision in the universal DH world will be taken away. But how often does that actually happen?
So I was going to say that's an awesome moment. Don't get me wrong, but the chances are so slim where the majority of the time there, you're going to get a guy like John Lester just either shanking the bunt or he's going to be out on the bunt or something, or he's going to just ground into a double play, like something bad. You're probably not going to have that kind of miraculous event happen.
And by the way, there were good hitting pitchers. Baumgartner is a very good hitting pitcher.
There's a handful.
The Mets got a bunt. Jake DeGrom, Syndergaard, Matz is a good hitting pitcher.
The Mets, basically.
Well, no, those are just they all have to be good hitting pitchers.
Right.
Josh Beckett hit a home run. If you remember, Rick Porcello, off of Max Scherzer.
True. Yep.
And
I think even David Price didn't David Price get a hit against the Nationals that series? It was like his first hit.
Go to YouTube and look up Rick Porcello's hit.
Oh, I remember. It was a double, right?
Yeah, it might have been bases loaded. It wasn't.
I think you're right.
But if you listen to the announcers, I think the YouTube video is the Nationals announcers, or it might have been a national game, I forget. But well, here's Rick Porcello against Max Scherzer. Yeah. Well, this is going to be something, ha ha. And they're just dismissing the whole at bat. And they're talking about their favorite movies and everything, and let's get this over with. And boom, he cracks,
That's
I think,
awesome.
left center field. And so, yeah, those things. And when I was a kid, Sonny Siebert was a great hitting pitcher. Gary Peters. The Red Sox used to use Gary Peters as a pinch hitter. There's just a stat I saw last week. There was a pitcher, and I forget who he is, got 3 intentional walks one year. He was a pitcher, but because of the situation, runner on second, nobody out or whatever, they actually walked a pitcher.
There can be some exciting moments. I think these days, especially for better or worse, I guess, you want that JD Martinez kind of coming up rather than, Madison. But Madison Bumgarner might be an exception, but you'd rather that big Nelson Cruz or someone like that coming up in that situation.
All right, so let me pose a question to you. National Hockey League, National Basketball Association, National Football League, Major League Baseball. Those are the 4 major league sports with apologies to MLS. Out of those 4 major sports, baseball is the only sport where when the game goes to overtime, people start to leave. This is something I've noticed for years and years and years. I'm in the press box. Nobody's going to leave an NFL game. Games go overtime because it's,
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
You can interrupt for 2 seconds.
I think most people are leaving, and forgive me if I'm wrong. I think most people are leaving because they have like a train to catch. Like, oh shit, the game's going long. I got to go because the train's at whatever time, the trains in Boston only run till say probably midnight. Mm-hmm. So the game's going, it's 11:30. Now you're going into extra innings. You got to get the hell out of there. That might be completely off base, but that's one theory.
It's part of the problem.
I see.
If it's 11:30, it's because the game is gone 8, 9, 10, 4.5 hours. And baseball games lumber along as it is, and people in their minds, they only can devote so much time. So there are two factors in play. Number one, it's a 162 game season. So any individual game isn't of like the NFL where every game is the end of the world. And number two, because baseball games tend to labor on and on because of various factors that we've discussed, people say, okay, you know what? I got to get the kids to bed. I have a job in the morning, the trains. I take the T to Fenway a lot. And yeah, that can be an issue. So, but be that as it may, because of these factors and other factors, people attach a time element to a Major League Baseball game. And, you know, NFL, NBA, NHL, people aren't going to leave. They just don't. And I've seen it. I'm sitting there in the press box. All right, we go to overtime. You look down. Everyone's just, all right, here we go, overtime. Bottom of the ninth, 3-3. Mookie flies to center, and we go to the 10th inning. I look down, and there are people just, and they're gathering all their stuff, and it's almost like they don't even discuss it. All right, let's go, because
those are more so. I think there's a lot more casual fans. I think that's kind of what you're getting at. There's just a lot more casual baseball fans. If you're a fan of the Patriots, chances are you're very invested. If you're a fan, most of my friends are not heavily invested in the Red Sox.
Nobody goes
huge baseball fans.
Nobody goes to a Patriots game because it's a day out.
Correct. That's what I mean. Yeah.
It's even the music. I wrote a big feature for The Athletic on pro sports theme music. And if you listen to the CBS and the Fox, it's like they're launching off the spears and shields. They're going off to war.
Yeah.
And if you've been to a Patriots game and you're driving down Route 1 and it's bumper to bumper traffic, and you see the people walking toward the stadium, they've all got Gronk and Brady, and they're it's like serious stuff. And I know they do the tailgating and they throw the Nerf football and all that. But football is not, it's a very serious thing.
Yes.
With baseball, you know, you get the whole George Carlin thing. Baseball is played in the park. And
Sweet Caroline. It's like
Caroline. Yeah. And I remember a couple of years ago when last year, when the Bruins played the St. Louis Blues in the Stanley Cup final, well, there was an off night one night between games, and the Cardinals were at home playing, I think, the Giants, and all the media, everybody went, and they have that like platform out in right field way up. The tickets are like, you know, $8 or something. Not on like the roof at Fenway, but it's a bigger stadium and it's a newer stadium. And we were all out there, beer and hot dogs and camaraderie, and we were sort of watching the game, but we just wanted to see the ballpark. I mean, I had been there because I had covered the World Series there and some other stuff, but we were all, these were a lot of hockey writers who had never been to the St. Louis ballpark, Busch Stadium. And we were kind of watching the game, but it was a night out. There was lots of beer, lots of hot dogs, such like burgers and stuff. The food was great, brats and stuff. And I think a lot of people go to baseball games because it's a night out. And then it's 20 after 10. We're going to the 10th inning. Toodaloo.
So how do you get more hardcore fans of the sport?
We don't need more hardcore fans. If I owned a Major League Baseball team, I'd be thrilled if casual fans were coming every night, because they're filling the ballpark. They're enriching our coffers, which we need money to pay players and improve the product. You know, I'd like to, you may be surprised. I actually would like to see a new Fenway Park. I think Fenway's antiquated, it's crowded.
It's definitely not an ideal park. Like, I get what you're saying. It's actually the only park I've ever been to, like, which is crazy, but I don't get out much. Yeah, I don't get out much. But whenever I'm in there, I'm like, this place is not designed for what baseball, like what it is today. Like it's a landmark, but it could use a big time remodeling at the least. I agree with that.
Baseball, Bob Ryan from the Globe describes Fenway as a 19th century ballpark No, it's a 21st century ballpark, because built for people who were born in the 19th century.
Yeah, it kind of is.
We are physically bigger people than we were. Fenway opened in 1912, and
Yeah.
it would just we're big protein bombs now. We eat more, we lift more.
Hmm.
We are physically bigger people, and people in 1912 didn't go to Fenway because it was a day out. It was a lot more. Oh, it's baseball, the Royal Rooters and all that, and accoutrements and sushi and changing stations for babies. None of that stuff was in evidence in 1912. People are a lot more into creature comforts now than they were, and Fenway doesn't offer that. And it's just an entirely different experience.
Right.
But having
One thing I
having
want.
said that, but having said
Yeah, go
that,
ahead.
that's why the Red Sox aren't in a real hurry to rebuild Fenway, because Fenway is America's most beloved ballpark.
Yeah.
I don't know if
That's
there's
always going to be the resistance to it, and I'm conflicted too because of that, and so I can't imagine how current Red Sox ownership, would ever want to change that.
If you go to Fenway in a pre and post pandemic world. If you go to Fenway now, any time of the year, there's people lined up outside to pay good hard-earned money to take a tour of
Right.
Fenway Park. And I've often used this line, I'll use it again. People pay more money now to take a tour of an empty Fenway Park than paid to buy a ticket to an actual game when I was in high school.
That's
And
crazy.
and people come from all over the country, all over the world, just to go to Fenway Park. And you see it. Like when I was a kid, you go to Fenway, you didn't see people in Philly shirts walking around. There's something Glenn Ordway always, we used to do the EEI show out in Lansdowne Street, and whichever team was in town, fans would come up to the glass and they do this with the shirt.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, oh, I'm a Philly, yeah, great, good for you, and go. And but when I was a kid, you didn't see like hundreds of fans wearing the apparel of the opposing team. You went to a Sox game to be Red Sox. You might see an odd guy here and there, or a family or something. But the notion of fans taking road trips to see opposing ballparks and to root for their team. There are people who plan vacations to go to Fenway, and they plan for the week that their team is in Boston, and they buy
Right.
tickets. And there's a whole family of Royals fans with the shirts and the caps and everything. And obviously, if you've ever traveled, you haven't, but if you travel with the Red Sox, if you go to Tropicana Field at Camden Yards, the place is filled with Red Sox fans.
Right. Yeah,
Baseball,
you don't even need to travel to know
yeah,
that. I mean, you watch the
yeah,
broadcast and it's "Let's go Red Sox" chants. So
yeah. And people, because it's a night out, it's entertaining, and people love seeing the new ballparks. And
yeah,
I am extremely lucky that I covered baseball as a beat writer when I did, because I got to see all of the old ballparks and all of the new ones.
yeah,
So you go to Milwaukee County Stadium, I covered games there. Now you got Miller Field, Miller Park, I've
yeah.
covered games there. Old Busch Stadium, New Busch Stadium, Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh, PNC Park. And it was a good era for me, and because I love seeing ballparks. Of all the new ballparks, the only ones I haven't seen, and it's only because they've only opened in the last couple of years, is the new one in Texas and the new one in Atlanta. I saw that, and oddly enough, both those cities are in their third new ballpark. I was at Atlanta Fulton Stadium. I was at Turner Field. I haven't been to the new ballpark in Atlanta. I was at the old Arlington Stadium, which was a real dump, and then the new ballpark, which has now been replaced by the new ballpark. So those are the only two I haven't been to.
There's probably only a handful, and if I wasn't from Boston, Fenway would be one of them. But there's probably only a handful of parks I truly like, our bucket list parks. Like I need to go see PNC Park. I need to go see it's now Oracle. But
San
I
Francisco,
not or yeah, San Francisco, whatever the hell it's named now.
it's got six
Um,
things, yeah.
yeah, I don't even know. But San Francisco, I actually did a tour of Petco, but I want to go back because it was like they were setting up for some monster truck thing, so the whole field was dirt. Like it wasn't it wasn't the beautiful stadium that it should have been. So Wrigley is another one just because of the history. So there's probably only a handful that I would personally want to go. Camden. So
I would put, not that you asked, I would put Camden number one.
yeah,
I love because it was the template from which all the other ballparks came. And the way they wedged it into the urban scape by keeping the B&O warehouse in right field. I would put Camden number one, Oracle number two. PNC is beautiful. God, I could just.
that's the one I think that tops my list because I've just seen I've just seen kind of the almost like the aerial view of it. You just see like how beautiful it is, and that's the one that tops my list. Kind of switching gears here. You don't have to talk about this if you don't want to. I don't know how kind of sensitive of a topic it is. David Price a few years ago. You obviously, I think you and Evan actually kind of had a dust up with him after, like, I don't know if remember what I'm talking about. Maybe there was multiple instances. But take me through that whole ordeal, because I don't think I've read any further on the situation. I don't know if maybe you wrote some sort of column around it, but I don't remember. Like, just take me through that situation.
Dust up was not with me. I mean, I had dust ups with David later on.
Yeah.
The dust up was between David Price and Evan.
Yeah.
How I get involved in it is I wrote about it. And
I see. Okay.
And what happened was, Price had said, okay, so it's a weird domino thing. Dan Shaughnessy had talked with David Price before the game, and Price said, I'm not going to talk with the media anymore. And Dan wrote a column about it, and the column was posted during the game. And this was at New York at Yankee Stadium. Mm-hmm. So it pops up during about the fourth inning of the game. It was what we call an early column that Dan had written. And I was still at the Herald. And so we're all aware of that column. Evan tweeted out a reference to the column and said, according to Major League Baseball rules, players don't have to talk with the media.
Right.
And it was fairly simple. The game ends, and we're walking down that long hallway in the clubhouse to get to John Farrell's office. And I remember it like it was yesterday. David Price was standing next to a hamper or something in the hallway. And as I walked by him, I could hear him in a very friendly voice say, hey, Evan, you got a second? And I could hear Evan say, yeah. And I didn't think much of it. And I went into John Farrell's office. And within 2 minutes, through the cinder block wall, you could hear Evan and David Price yelling at each other. Somehow David Price took it in a different way than what Evan intended. Evan was just pointing out, hey, they don't have to talk. But I think there were other factors between those two. And it got very loud and very animated. And then later on, everyone's down the other end of the club was talking to whoever the star of the game was. And Price was talking to Porcello.
That's the part that I remember. Yeah.
And I wanted to do a column on Price saying, hey, is it true you don't want to talk with the media? Because I can't just assume that Dan had written it, but I wanted to hear what David Price had to say. And there's kind of an unwritten rule about the media is that there's certain times you do not talk to a player. You do not ever talk to that night's starting pitcher. Before the game, and the starting pitcher is sitting there, he's pitching that night. Routine, protocol, decorum dictates you don't talk to him.
First thing I learned going to Fort Myers was that. That was the first thing I was taught.
Number two, if a player is eating, if he's on the phone, or if he's talking to another player, you don't want to walk up. He's talking to him, hey, excuse me, like that.
Right.
So he was talking to Porcello, and I stood 15, 20 feet away, waiting for him to finish talking with Rick Porcello so I could go up. And he looks up at me and he goes, what are you, like that? Like that. They kind of turned into something. So I said, I got nothing against David Price. I mean, he was a difficult guy to work with from our perspective. Mm-hmm. I don't think he was ever a comfortable fit in Boston. It seems to be, well, he will be, assuming he pitches with the Dodgers at some point.
Yeah.
He could be a jerk in Boston, and I think it wasn't a good fit for him. He signed it because they offered him a boatload of money, which he might not have gotten someplace else. And And by the way, I have no issue with him. I've been crystal clear on this. I said from the very beginning of the pandemic that I wasn't going to criticize any player for opting out for any reason. And I've been consistent along. I championed his cause when David Price opted out. He didn't want to be part of it this season. I don't know if he regrets it now that they won the World Series, but that's for him to decide. And when Tuukka Rask opted out, I defended him, and the Bruins fans came down on me for that.
That part that we don't even have to get in depth on that. I don't know how you could be against Rask given the circumstances there. And with Price, I mean, at the time, there were a lot of players, NFL, MLB, like a lot of people were opting out, so you can't really blame them. I know his team's great, but they're going to be great for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Last thing, and I'll let you go. The Hall of Fame ballot for 2021 was released, I want to say last week. Do you get a vote in that? Yeah.
Right. You gotta get a vote.
I'm making sure. I'm just making sure. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. So I'm not going to list off every single guy. Do you have an idea of who deserves it?
I'm going to pass on that because I really haven't done a deep dive into it.
That's fair.
I'll just give you the 2 hit points. I do vote for Clemens. Okay. I do vote for Barry Bonds.
That was going to be the next question. So
there were already steroid guys in the Hall of Fame. There were no distinct rules governing steroid use back then. Major League Baseball did nothing to thwart the use of steroids, and now they expect the writers to clean up the game.
Right.
So, and the other reason and I didn't vote for them for several years, but Bud Selig was Major League Baseball commissioner at the time. He retires, boom, he gets whisked right off to the Hall of Fame. Joe Torre's in the Hall of Fame. Tony La Russa's in the Hall of Fame. They won World Series because they had players using steroids. And so the way I look at it is if Bud Selig is in the Hall of Fame, Tony La Russa is in the Hall of Fame, if Joe Torre is in the Hall of Fame, and I don't begrudge them for being there, they should be, then it's hypocritical not to vote for some of the players who helped get them there. And
agreed.
The game had unprecedented growth during Bud's tenure. And that's because chicks dug the long ball. Remember that big ad campaign back in the late 80s?
They just had a documentary of Sammy Sosa versus Mark McGwire, the home run race. It was the most exciting thing that season, or that decade, I should say.
I covered McGwire breaking the record in St. Louis against Chicago Cubs. And it was Mike Morgan gave up the 60th or 61st. I forget which one. But yeah, I do vote for them. And I vote for Clemens, I vote for Bonds, and in case this was in the back of your head, I am voting for Curt Schilling. I voted for him all the way along. I don't think there's any doubt to me, given his 3,000 strikeouts and his like otherworldly postseason record. I think Curt Schilling belongs in the Hall of Fame. I think he's a jerk. I think some of the stuff that he's put out in social media is extremely insensitive. I don't agree with his politics, but I'm okay with that. It's the way his politics manifest themselves on social media that bothers me, but doesn't keep me from voting for him. He belongs.
You got to be able to separate the two, and unfortunately, I think a lot of people aren't able to do that. I didn't, for whatever reason. It's like a grudge almost. Last thing, David Ortiz and A-Rod are going to be on the ballot next year, I believe. Do you see them getting in? Do you think you'll vote for them?
Okay, so I have a policy of never discussing Hall of Fame readiness or worthiness for someone who's not on the ballot. So I recuse myself from that part of the sport until they're on the ballot. Okay. If you're asking if I think they'll get in, I think that David Ortiz will get in. I think it'll be a tougher road to hoe. People always get that wrong. They call it road to hoe. It's row. It's like a row of vegetables and a hoe. So it's row to hoe. Did you know that, by the way?
I've never heard that, actually. I've never heard that saying in my life, so I don't know if you're even right or if the other way is right.
There's certain little things that people screw up. One of them is row to hoe, and the other one is the use of the word penultimate. People always use it as meaning it's the
biggest thing. Yeah,
the biggest
penultimate.
It's to the biggest thing. There's the ultimate, and then there's what before that, the penultimate.
Yeah.
And the other one is erstwhile. Like Joe Morgan of the Red Sox once called me, there he is, Steve Buckley, the erstwhile Canterbridgean. And I said, well, no, actually, I still live in Cambridge. And and I think people think erstwhile means kind of like, happy and whatever. Erstwhile sounds casual and fun.
Right.
Erstwhile means former.
Oh, okay.
And I call me the erstwhile Cantabrigian, which would mean that
You
I'm
used to live
not
there.
there. But talk about going off on a tangent. What was the question?
David Ortiz, A-Rod. Well, I guess
Yeah,
because I know you don't want to touch on that, but do you
No,
see them
I'm
getting
not
it?
going to vote for because they're not in the ballot yet. But
Right.
it's tough enough to talk about the guys I do vote for, because like the way it is now, it used to be a fun thing to vote for the Hall of Fame. Ooh,
It's a big
and
controversial thing now because your ballots
the
out there
argument, and
criticized.
I remember years ago. This is a true story. Bob Ryan and I were in the press box at the old stadium in Foxborough. And we were talking about, I want to say Dave Concepcion, whether he should be in the Hall of Fame. And we're going back and forth. And all of a sudden, there was an announcement on the in-game PA at the old stadium. Attention, will the two gentlemen who were talking about the Baseball Hall of Fame please either keep it down or bring the conversation to the back room? And because we were just, no, how can you vote for Dave? Like that. And that's when the whole voting for the Hall of Fame was fun. Now, because of steroids and character clauses and social media, and I will vote for Kurt Schilling, and I will post my results on Twitter when I submit my ballot, and I will be viewed as a hero to some people and a scallywag by others. And you get some nasty commentary from people solely because of how you voted, and which is, of course, the way the national process is going now in the president race. But it's gone are the days when you can have a lighthearted discussion about the Hall of Fame. It's a lot more serious now.
Gone are the days you can really have a lighthearted discussion about anything because everything's on social media. Everyone's behind a screen and typing whatever they want. So that's the way it is now.
Yeah.
Look, this was a great conversation. I'm glad we had it. It's been a long time coming to actually sit down
and all that fun stuff.
We'll post it. I'm thinking early next week. I'm not 100% sure. I got a couple other people to do this week, so I'm thinking about just throwing them all out there at once.
Yeah.
But because we're just getting started. Congratulations, you're the first person I've interviewed for this podcast so far. We've got a couple lined up, but you are number one. So
who's lined up besides me?
I don't know if I want to spoil it.
Oh, okay.
You'll just have to come back and check it out. That's
fair enough.
Hit the subscribe button.
With me.
Yeah, there you go. But again, thank you very much for coming on. I will say there's a lot of people in this industry who I think kind of have their nose up in the air. I've kind of learned that. There's a few that are nice people, but you have always been good to me. You've always been willing to have a discussion, so I do appreciate that. And again,
that's
thank
all
you.
on you because you stuck your nose into our discussion. So
hey, so you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes. I don't know.
We might never have known each other if you didn't hey, I got something to say here. So
well, yeah, if you didn't say don't trade Jackie Bradley Jr. for Jose Abreu, we wouldn't have. We wouldn't be here right now.
Okay, I must say. I might have made that trade. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I didn't see Abreu's future as you did. But I will tell you, I really just love watching him play. So I will mourn the passing, not the passing, but the trade of Mookie Betts. I wanted Mookie Betts to play 20 years for the Red Sox.
Yeah, that's a whole other discussion I don't want to get into because I'm going to get yelled at for this, but I didn't hate the trade. I don't want to get into it, but I didn't hate it.
Say that for
right. Yeah, absolutely. That's a teaser for the next time you're on here. Thanks again, Buck. I appreciate it. And have a great rest of your day. Hopefully this pandemic ends soon so we can actually do this in person.
All right.